Good morning, everyone. How are you doing on this fabulous Wednesday morning? Just applying some lip gloss. This is officially the last Wednesday of the month. And even though we're at the 22nd of February, this is the last Wednesday of the month because February is such a short month. So it's good to see everyone here. Thank you so much for being here. Hi, Sherry. Good morning, my dear friend. Welcome. Always good to see you. Well, I hope you are having a wonderful start to your morning. It is a rainy day here in Dallas. We had a front move in. There's Winter Storm Olive that is moving across the country right now, and a good third of our country from the midpoint up is snowy and cold. Sherry, how are you doing up there in Fargo? Sherry is joining us from Fargo, North Dakota, and boy, I'm telling you, they are just getting hammered with some cold temps today. Down here in the South, we're getting rain. We're thankful that we're not getting the freezing temps. So wherever you are, I hope you'll grab a mug, pull up a chair, curl up on the couch wherever you are, and kick back for a few minutes and join me as we celebrate. We're celebrating. We're celebrating the end of February. We're celebrating our 6-week walk through our fantastic book that we've been going through for writers called Write for Life by Julia Cameron. And yeah, we're celebrating a lot of fun things. Spring is going to be here. Happy Ash Wednesday. It is Ash Wednesday, the official beginning of the Lenten season. Good morning, Savannah. Hello, my sweet. How are you doing? Good to see you. It's cold there, Sherry? Okay, so when you say it's cold there, it's got to be cold because, North Dakota and all of that. So if this is your first time to catch me on a live broadcast, thanks for popping in and saying hello. Thanks for just taking a few seconds to check it out, see what it's all about. My name is Renee Harden, and by trade, I am an editor. I'm a content writer. I'm a writing coach for people who are wanting to get started sharing their stories. And so I am excited today because as we wind up the month of February, and who always comes and joins us during our broadcasts, that would be Milo the kitty. So, Milo, where are you? There he is. Yep, he always joins us for our morning broadcast, especially when it's rainy outside. He doesn't want to go outside too much. Well, come on up. Come on up and join us. Yeah, I know. And today's featured mug is my mug that is the endless library of books, right? Because who can have enough books? Oh, Milo, you've been outside and you're a little wet. Yes, he is. So he's right here to join us on the vlogcast. He doesn't want anyone to miss him. Say hi to everybody, Milo. Say good morning. Good morning. So, yes, so I am in the middle of writing my story through the lens of all of my coffee mugs. So, this endless library mug, I love it, right? Shows off all the books. Maybe one of your stories can join the unending library. Love it. Well, guys, we have a lot to celebrate today. We have a lot to talk about because, as I mentioned, we have been going through a 6-week walkthrough of Julia Cameron's Write for Life, creative tools for every writer. And so we are walking into week 6, which is celebrating our achievement of what we've been working on for the last 5 weeks. This is going to be week 6, and we're going to be wrapping up what we're doing, right, in this last week of February, because next Wednesday, guys, is March the 1st. A brand new month. How are you doing on your writing goals? How are you doing on accomplishing what you want to have as a story and getting started on sharing that story? So we've been walking through this book, and I'm going to go through chapter 6 today. But I wanted to talk about a couple of things this morning because in the news has been some interesting stories. Um, Michael and I have been watching the Oscar nominated films. We've got two more to go, and then we've watched all of them. We watched the live action shorts and the animated short films. So, gosh, just some fabulous work out there from some great people from around the country sharing their stories in film. And so we've been catching up with those. We've been watching those. I'll be sharing my reviews over this next week of the top 10 films, ones that I think might have my vote when it comes to the Academy Awards. So, March 12th, guys, that's when the film industry is going to be honoring the top films, the top work in storytelling through film. So I'm excited. I love watching all the films. I love checking in and sharing um, what I think of those stories. I also want to know what you think of the stories. If you've seen any of the movies, there's some great ones out there. There's some strange ones out there too. Um, we watched Tar last night, starring Kate Blanchett. Um, the film definitely has a certain type of audience. I can see why the movie was nominated because Kate Blanchett's performance is absolutely brilliant. I mean, right from the beginning, you know why she was nominated and why the film was nominated. So I'll be sharing a little bit more about that. But in other news, have you been seeing the stories that have been circulating about Roald Roald Dahl and how his books are being edited to make them more inclusive, more friendly to readers? Have you seen that? It's been an interesting thing. There's a lot of conversation on both sides. A lot of people have been, you know, chiming in on how they feel about that. So I'm just curious. I want to get a consensus here on what you think about it, because what is happening, and again, you've got to remember that a lot of Roald Dahl's books were written a long time ago. Long time ago. I mean, a lot of works that were in copyright, several have been released. Some of which have been some of our favorite storybook characters. So, for example, the works by of the author of Winnie the Pooh, things like Bambi, Peter Pan, the early stories, all of those copyrights are now being released. And so now we have things like horror movies coming out about Killer Winnie the Pooh. Don't know how I feel about that. Um, don't know how I feel about that. And so that has been a big here we go. I'm looking at I was trying to find the news story about what's going on with Roald Dahl. So Roald Dahl's story. You're familiar with Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, which is the original story behind Willy Wonka. So, new editions of the best-selling author's children's classics, including Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. He's also the author for James and the Giant Peach, also for Matilda. Um, they have been rewritten in an effort to make them less offensive and more inclusive. Changes have prompted widespread criticism from prominent literary figures and others. The book's publisher, Puffin Books, and the author's estate did not immediately respond to questions about the nature of the changes. However, The Telegraph, a British newspaper, earlier reported that hundreds of words, including descriptions of characters' appearances, races, and genders, have been changed or removed in at least 10 of the author's 19 children's books. Roald Dahl died in 1990. A review of the author's works began in 2020 before Netflix acquired the Roald Dahl Story Company, which manages the author's copyrights and trademarks. When publishing new print runs of books written years ago, it's not unusual to review the language used alongside updating other details, including a book's cover and page layout. Our guiding principle throughout has been to maintain the storylines, characters, and the irreverence and sharp edged spirit of the original text. Changes reported by the Telegraph include characters who are no longer described as fat, and references to mothers and fathers now have been updated to say parents or family. Mr. Bahari, the spokesperson for the company, said that the estate had partnered with Inclusive Minds, an organization that champions diversity and accessibility in children's literature. While noting that it did not write, edit, or rewrite texts, the group said that it had helped provide valuable input when it comes to reviewing language that can be damaging or perpetuating harmful stereotypes. Now, why did they do this? Why did they go back and sort of change some of this? Well, Roald Dahl was overtly anti-Semitic. He was no stranger to criticism, and his works were called antisocial, brutish, and anti-feminist. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory has twice been turned into films, and another adaptation is set to be released this year. There are millions, probably, of his books in secondhand editions in school libraries and classrooms, wrote Philip Pullman, author of his Dark Materials. What are you going to do about them? All those words are still there. You're going to round up all the books and cross them out with a big black pen? But a spokesman for Mr. Sunak, referencing a work by Roald Dahl, who is Mr. Sunak is the British Prime Minister. He said, when it comes to our rich and varied literary heritage, the Prime Minister agrees with the BFG that we shouldn't gobble funk around the words. Suzanne Nossel, Chief Executive of PEN America, an organization that supports freedom of expression, said on Twitter that the organization was alarmed by the changes and that selective editing could represent a dangerous new weapon. So, how do you feel about that? Should an author's original language be left in the stories, the original books, or should they be edited, adapted, and updated as culture changes, as time changes? If you were the original author, would you want your words edited or changed to reflect updated societal norms? Or would you want your words to stay to represent a point of view from a time period over 100 years ago? It's an interesting concept. A lot of kerfluffle, but interesting nonetheless. So here's another thing that happened in the news. And we've got some new books that are coming out that I wanted to share about this. So it is Ash Wednesday. Today is the day that begins the Lenten season, where people of faith are contemplating a season of giving up something as a sacrifice in remembrance of Christ's sacrifice for us as we prepare for the Easter season coming up. So Ash Wednesday is today. You'll see a lot of people posting about that. You'll see Catholics who are getting the ashes on their forehead. It's a serious time for most people of faith. They are really contemplating and reflecting on their faith. And that's a huge thing. And there's been kind of a shakeup in the faith community. There was a news story that the Saddleback Church, formerly, pastored by Rick Warren, who's had a tremendous ministry, but the Saddleback Church has recently been ousted from the Baptist denomination for having a female pastor. Interesting. And so someone who knows a little bit about breaking with the Baptist denomination is a woman who has a new book out. She released her book yesterday. You're probably familiar with her work. Beth Moore released her book called All My Knotted Up Life. And so Beth Moore is a New York Times bestselling author. She's a speaker, she's a visionary, she's founder of Living Proof Ministries. She's devoted her whole life to helping women across the globe come to know the transforming power of Jesus. An established writer of many acclaimed books and Bible studies for women on spiritual growth and personal development, Beth is now unveiling her own story in this much anticipated debut memoir. So, in her book, All My Knotted Up Life, it includes 8 pages of photos. It explores Beth's childhood, love, marriage, and motherhood. She shares insights on what it was like when she was waist deep in a season of loss. Her break with the Baptist church was very public. She received a lot of backlash about it. She's going to discuss this in her book, where she had to break with the Southern Baptist movement. And she's also going to share details about how she began Living Proof Ministries. So, All My Knotted Up Life is told with surprising candor about some of the most personal heartbreaks and behind the scenes challenges that have marked Beth's life. But beyond that, it's a beautifully crafted portrait of resilience and survival, a poignant reminder of God's enduring faithfulness and proof positive that if we ever really took the time to hear people's full stories, we'd be amazed. We'd be shocked. We'd be slack-jawed. We'd be, right, surprised at what we might learn. So, check it out. Pick up a copy of Beth Moore's new memoir called All My Knotted Up Life. Let's see here. Bonnie. Good morning, Bonnie. Good to see you here. You say, seems they shouldn't change the author's original words, but maybe a disclaimer in the book itself to explain why they were changed. The universal consciousness is changing, and we have to figure out how to grow with it. That's an excellent perspective, Bonnie. That's an excellent perspective. Yes, I think adding a disclaimer in the updated editions of the books will help. Again, I think keeping the original copies of what it used to be like is important because we need to see what the perspective was back then to understand and see how those changes happened, how we grew and evolved over time in changing our perspectives, right? I know my perspective has changed in my 60 years of life, how I look back and viewed how I lived in Dallas when I was in my 20s versus now being back here 40 years later in my 60s. Interesting perspective. And I love that you said that. Mm. Mm. And so, speaking of the Oscars that I was talking about, there's another book that came out yesterday talking about stories, because another controversial thing, and of course, especially after the pandemic, a lot of things have changed and evolved. One of those being the Academy Awards, one of those being the Oscars. So, Michael Schulman released a book yesterday called Oscar Wars: The History of Hollywood in Blood, Sweat, and Tears, or Gold, Sweat, and Tears. A History of Hollywood in Gold, Sweat, and Tears. And so this is another event that has changed over the years, that has been forced to change the way it looks at films, the way it looks at storytellers, documentary films, and being more inclusive. They seem to have a challenge every year, with female directors, why they are overlooked, why certain films made by women are overlooked. But in Michael Schulman's book, he talks about what began as an industry banquet in 1929 has now exploded into a hallowed ceremony with red carpets and awards and envelopes. And right, I used to have an Oscar party at my house several years ago, invite people to dress up, or we would have a red carpet, or actually it was a piece of red fabric. You would walk into my house, and we made it a fun thing where we would vote. We would have ballots and we would vote. And so My husband and I do that. We get a ballot. We view the top movies. We look at the short films, the documentaries, so that we can have a seasoned approach to how we want to rank these movies. So, in Oscar Wars, Michael Schulman chronicles the remarkable sprawling history of the Academy Awards and the personal drama, some iconic and others never before released, that have played out on stage and off camera. Unlike other books on the subject, each chapter takes a deep dive into a particular year, a particular conflict, or even a category that tells a larger story of cultural change, from Louis B. Mayer all the way up to the movie Moonlight. Schulman explains how the red carpet runs through contested turf, and the victors aren't always as clear as the names drawn from the envelopes. Caught in the crossfire are people, their thwarted ambitions, their artistic epiphanies, their messy collaborations, and their dreams fulfilled or dashed. Featuring a star-studded cast of some of the most powerful Hollywood players of today and yesterday, as well as outsiders who have stormed the palace gates, this captivating history is a collection of revelatory tales, each representing a turning point for the Academy, for movies, and for our culture at large. You know, it's an evolving thing. It's storytelling in a different format. So, how do we handle those changes? Well, it'll be interesting to read that in this book. So, encourage you to grab a copy. Those are a couple of books that came out yesterday that I thought you'd be interested in, or I thought I would share with you. But we are going to get back to our main book today, which is Write for Life. We've been going through this. If you've been following my broadcasts, you know, we've been going through this week by week. I've been taking a chapter each week. And this week, we are celebrating. We are celebrating what we've accomplished and learned going through this book. I know for myself, developing a habit of morning pages has been eye-opening, revelatory for me as a writer. I appreciate the fact that I'm learning things about myself, and I'm also just the habit of writing my thoughts down, clearing my head, getting all of those out on paper allows me to have a more productive writing time when it comes to writing the segments for my book. So I'm going to be spending some time over the next few months, March, April, and May, really focusing in on, I'm going back over and editing the sections that I wrote previously. This because I wrote those back at the beginning of last year, believe it or not. And so I want to go back. I want to edit them. I want to take a look at them since I haven't seen them in a while. I have over 60 entries that I need to go back and look at, and then continue writing the segments for my story. So let's talk a little bit about what's in chapter 6, about how we celebrate what we've achieved, because it's important. We need to celebrate. So if you've been walking through this book, you've been doing the work, you've been writing every day, we're writing every week. Hopefully now you have worked on what could be the beginnings of a working draft. Now, you might have a working draft already in progress. You might already have a working draft that you've completed and you don't know what to do with it next, that you've sat on it, you kind of looked at it. So, first drafts. First drafts are great. They are an accomplishment of your writing coming to somewhat of an ending. You realize now that you have fulfilled what you wanted to do from beginning to end. You know your starting point, you know your ending point, and you've written as much as you can, and you have a first draft. So she says, your ending may be abrupt, but that's better than dragged out. Knowing when your draft is done calls for intuition. You kind of sense when your story is going to come to a close. Because I'm still writing mine, I'm not at that point yet. But I do know where I want to end. I know how I want my story to begin, and I know how I want the story to end. So she says, there's no magic formula telling you to stop. Instead, you feel that your draft is at an end. You will know when you've written as much as you can and you feel like your story is at a good stopping point. Okay. So She said it helps to think of your project in thirds. The first third introduces your characters and their questions or their problem. If my book is written more as like a memoir, I'm taking snippets of my life and I'm sharing them through the lenses of my cups. So I'm going to be introducing those. Of course, so the character in my story is me. I know how I'm going to introduce it and I know how I'm going to talk about my story. Then she says the third traces the question or problem through time. So I know that as my story develops over time, I'm going to be sharing a lot of stories of places I've been, people I've met, things I've done, favorite places. And so I want to think about how that story is going to flow. And then the third part and final third answers the question or solves the problem. So if you think of your story in thirds, that helps you come to a way of knowing what your ending is, right? So think of the first section as where you introduce your characters, then you introduce the conflict or the problem, right? And then your attempts at solving the problem. So in my story, I don't necessarily have a problem, but I'm sharing my life. So I want to start early and talk about the mugs that shaped from places that shaped my life early on. And I can sort of chronologically go through my life and see them. So I know how I'm going to organize them. And it takes me from beginning to end. So when you have a first draft and you kind of get it to a finishing point, okay, here's what you need to do next. Okay. So you have a first draft, you've got it done. You really feel like you've got the beginnings of a good story. What do you do next? Okay. Well, your second draft comes from you sitting down and reading it. Now, this does not mean that you meticulously stop at every single place and make notes. What you want to do is you want to read it all the way through, encountering any rough spots or places where there's smooth sailing. Now, in some ways, you're going to feel like, oh, your first draft is bad, but you want to read it through and read it out loud to yourself because that's how you're going to pick up on little things and note them. Don't try to make edits right now, but note places where there's a little gap, maybe there's a little hiccup, kind of a rough spot, if you will. Okay. Now, she says to begin with, on the second draft, check your attitude. Are we prepared to do more work? Or do we dig our heels in and saying that our first draft is good and it's ready to go? Okay. Because your first draft is exactly that. It's a first draft. And so now it's time for a second draft. This is the draft of improvement. So you have to surrender your ego's resistance to change, and you have to be open minded enough to welcome change. Okay. So you've written your first draft, you've read it through. Now on the third time, so read it through all the way, making just little maybe notes in the margins, ooh, that's ooh, or ooh, that's rough. Ooh, make those notes, right? Now the third time through, this is where you go through and add a little more description. Maybe the dialogue needs to be a little better. Maybe you don't like transitions, or maybe you don't know that those rough spots are there. That's where someone like me can come in and help you identify those places in your manuscript that need a little bit more polish or a little bit more work. So you want to kind of outline that as you go through your draft. You will name and claim the people, places, and events that occur. Make an outline. If you are outlining, read and outline as you read. For example, you could write pages 1 through 4, introducing the main character. Pages 5 through 9, introducing the conflict or the problem. Pages 10 through 15, the first attempt at solving the problem, and so on. Your page here to here, introducing a new character. Page here to here, this character has, right, and sort of outline as you go. Outlining helps tell you your structure. You can identify your story structure by doing this. Sometimes you may see an immediate fix. A character may appear too early and then disappear far too late. If you spot this trouble, you can cure it by having the character appear again sooner or just shuffling the scenes so that you can fix that. Okay. After you execute a full outline, make a copy of it. Your first outline will tell you exactly what you have. Your second outline is for making changes. Tape the two outlines to the wall near your writing station. Now, dig in and get to work. What changes does your outline show you that you need to make? Are there scenes that need to be added? So, this is the process that you will go through before you bring it to me. Now, if you're unsure of your steps, if you would rather trust this to someone like me who will go through, read it, and sort of point out those areas where you might need to change this transition, you might need to add a little bit of dialogue here. This is inconsistent because this character is here, but later in the story, they're here. And how did that character get from here to there without you developing that character in any way for the readers? So those kinds of things you'll pick up on. I'm not talking grammar. I'm not talking anything like that right now. We're talking the story structure, right? So you will have a first draft, you will have a second blueprint draft, okay? And then you have executed, and if you've done this, you'll do this to your second draft, and you will have a draft that is ready for other eyes, okay? This is where you need to be really careful. Who are your people that you trust to give you objective feedback? Okay. You could call it criticism. I prefer to call it feedback. A lot of times, especially if you know the genre that you're writing in, right? And you have what are called beta readers. These are people who are going to read your manuscript all the way through, and they will give you feedback on what they think about the story. Now, you really need to be careful in choosing your friends wisely here. Julia goes on to say, to thine own self be true, thou canst not be false to any man. So, what do we mean by that? She says, all of us have an inner compass that signals to us when we go astray and when we go along with an agenda that is not in our best interest. So, as writers, we are vulnerable. Our imaginations are well honed. This means we may concoct stories to soothe our psyches. When our radar sounds, we may invent a storyline to explain it. Rather than receive a warning, we may take up a tale that messes with our wishes. Writers are gullible. So she said, listening closely, listening to our gut, we will find friendships that are generous and supportive. Failing to attend to our radar, we find ourselves saddled with relationships that are dangerous to our self-worth and our work. I'm not saying put it out there on Facebook to get, 10 people to read your story. Find a group of people that you trust, that are well read, that have experienced reading good books, and will take a look at your manuscript and give you feedback. Were they able to read through it smoothly? Were there any places where they were kind of like, oh, I didn't know what you meant when you said this, or I'm not sure what's going on with the character and they will be able to give you helpful feedback that allows you to go back, okay, and make changes to your manuscript, because what you're wanting to do is you're wanting to write for your audience. So listen to that small percentage of your audience that gives you that objective feedback. You are looking now for believing mirrors, right? Believing mirrors. We are seeking friends and readers with integrity. We in our work deserve the dignity of well-chosen companions. Persons, you want to look for people who believe in you and your strength, people who are not jealous, people who understand your goal. They understand that what you are looking for is excellence in writing, in a story. So believing mirrors is what Julia calls them. So canvass your friends for believing mirrors. Who among your potential readers is jealous? Not perhaps in a day-to-day exchange, but a fatal flaw in a believing mirror. You are looking for those who are generous and you want more than one. While you will weigh all feedback carefully, you do not want to give any single reader too much power. So select more than one. If you can find 3 to 5, that's great. If you can find 10, that's even better, because these people will be your circle who will provide feedback and who will also possibly write a review of your story. So once we do that, once we've given it to beta readers, once we've gotten feedback, where do we go from there? Well, now comes the phase where you kind of get me involved, right? Because now you're wanting to polish this work and make it the best it possibly can be. So Julia goes on to say, polish comes from clarity, and clarity comes from simplicity. We are striving to communicate, and that communication must hold first place in our minds. The rest is just window dressing. So when you polish a piece of work, you make minor changes indicated by your readers and yourself. Does it begin where it should and end where it should? Do you repeat yourself? Do you repeat certain phrases over and over? Right? And so polishing it, polishing it is my job. I go through and help bring forth your best words. I help you find words if you're not quite sure how to say it, but you know what you want to say. A lot of times I'm able to read through what my authors are saying, but I'm able to help them make better word choices to convey those ideas and get that across. So, as a rule of thumb, we must be very careful about the criticism we receive. We must always show our work to believing mirrors, those people who will wish us well and enjoy reading for the sake of reading. Ideally, more than one reader must be sought out and all must be constructive. So, how do you know when your work is finished? You'll know when your work is finished because you'll either probably get to the stage where you have written so much and you have nothing more to say, or you've resolved things in your story enough to where your characters are ready to take a rest. Maybe you have volume 2, or maybe your characters are ready to ride off into the sunset, right? So you'll know when your work is finished. And so, how do you make that happen? She says, being done with a piece of work is a feeling based on facts. I have written what I planned to write. I've drawn heavily on my inner well. I have taken care to replenish it with artist dates. Remember, we talked about artist dates are those creative days that you take to either go on a walk or get out of the house or take yourself somewhere to get a change of scenery that allows your inner well to refill, right? You can't write from an empty well. And she says, by now, reaching within for further words, you don't have any more. You're done with this story. You feel like you've ended it at a good place. So, what do you do next? Right? So, I want you to take a piece of paper and I want you to draw a circle. And then I want you to draw another circle inside that one, right? And inside that smaller circle, I want you to put the names of like 2 to 3 friends that you really trust will give you objective feedback on your story. These are people who you're in good relationship with, that you know you can trust what they say, that you're not intimidated or in any way um, made to feel bad by any feedback that you will get from these people. Okay. So that's your first circle. Then in the larger circle, I want you to make a list of names of people who you can trust to read your finished draft. In other words, you've gone through and made changes. Your believing mirrors, your close confidants, those that you trust in the inner circle, have given you constructive feedback. And now you're looking for reader feedback, right? You want to let people read your story and give you feedback on how they feel as a reader reading your story for the first time, right? And then you're going to take that feedback and you're going to make notes. Some changes you can make, other changes you may decide are not necessary. And then it's time to bring someone like me in. That's when your book is ready for editing on a larger scale. Developmental editing helps with your story structure and looks at your character development and your dialogue, making sure that your story flow is there and accomplishes the goal that you set out for your story. Is it a mystery? Is it a book set in time travel? Is it a children's book? Is it a self help book? Is it a story about a cause that you believe in? Or is the story about the person who started the movement, right? Or is the story about your life? Whatever your story is, you can write it, you can do it, especially if you've been working through the last 6 weeks with me. So, if you haven't picked up a copy of this book yet and you want to go through it and you've been thinking about writing a story, I highly recommend going through this book. It will sort of take the blinders off in some areas, help you understand really what you're accomplishing in writing your story, and giving you some practical tools that you can apply each week to help make you become a better writer. Because after all, that's the goal, right? That is the goal for you to share your stories. Speaking of sharing stories, I am super excited because next week I'm going to be announcing the new book pick for the month of March in my book club. Right now, we are finishing up the book called Horse by Geraldine Brooks. Fascinating story. I have just learned so much about the horse racing world and about the one horse, Lexington, from which most of the Triple Crown winners over the last 75 to 80 years have come from. But this book is just stunning in its descriptions, in its character dialogue. And so I can't wait to introduce our new book and celebrating our new theme that's going to encompass all of the stories that we share in the month of March. I'm super excited about those. So I hope you will join me next week as we kick off the month of March with a brand new series and a brand new theme of stories that we're going to be sharing. So if you have any questions about writing your story, about writing your draft, maybe you've written your draft and you're at a point where you're ready to have it edited, if you don't have people who you feel like you can trust to read it for the first time, let me know. I'm happy to take a pass through it and give you my perspective on that. I'm also here to help you write it. You know, if you've written your draft or you've gotten your story to a good place and you were ready to take it to the next level, believe me, you can do it. I've helped several authors do it. It's encouraging to watch them hold their books in their hands for the first time and have them turn the pages and realize that they've shared their story. I'm excited about sharing mine, and I'm going to get busy working on that. And I would love to help you share yours. So if you have any questions, if you have any concerns, if you want to learn a little bit more about how to share your story or how to polish it, how to take those next steps at finalizing your draft, definitely let me know. You can contact me right here at ronaeharden.com/contact. You can also sign up to join the book club. You can also schedule a 30-minute consultation with me where we can review what your writing goals are and set some tangible ones that you can accomplish in the coming months. All right? Because that's what we're doing. We're sharing our stories, and I want to help you share yours. So, that's what we're doing. Celebrate what you've accomplished so far, because any steps you take towards being a better writer, that's worth celebrating. And I'm sipping and saluting you. So make today awesome. Take some time, get away, treat yourself, refill that inner well where you can fill up that reservoir of words that you have and share them with somebody today. You never know the difference that your words and your story can make in somebody else's life. I'm looking forward to sharing mine. I'll hope you'll stick around to read it. And until then, let's get busy writing, okay? Join me back here next week where we kick off the month of March celebrating a new month and a new set of goals that we have. All right. Take care, guys. Hope you have a fantastic day and the rest of your week. I'll be sharing more book recommendations and stories and fun right here on my page. So please be sure to like and follow this page for more writerly fun. All right. Um, your internet connection was a little dodgy, but you think you caught the major portion of it. Okay. Well, Bonnie, you can always go back and watch it via replay. That's the beauty of having it here. So, again, you can catch the replay and go back through it. If you have any questions, definitely let me know. I'm happy to answer those for you. All right. All right, guys. Happy Wednesday. Hope you have a great one. Get out there and share your awesome today. Somebody needs it. And I appreciate you for sharing yours with me today. Have a great one. I'll see you next Wednesday.